Yeah, I love these headsets. I get to move around and dance. I feel like Beyonce up here, or maybe Taylor Swift, so the libertarian Beyonce. But apparently I'm supposed to stand right here for the mic to work, but I'll do some dance moves later. Yeah, it's nice to be surrounded by fellow libertarians. We're familiar with seeking liberty or freedom from the state, but there's another type of freedom that we should seek, which is freedom from disease and possibly even death itself. So I'll tell you about longevity and medical freedom and how this links up with the Free Cities / network state movement. Just as a sort of curiosity, how many of you guys are familiar with the science of longevity, just by show of hands? Okay, wow, okay, probably about half of you or more. I'm impressed. Nice, okay. So let's get into it. So yeah, if you haven't read these books already, these are highly recommended, books of the decade. I'll talk about myself, Healthspan Capital, longevity biotech, or LongBio is a revolution in medicine, some case studies in longevity, decentralized science movement, or the DeSci movement, medical freedom by jurisdictional arbitrage, some FDA downsides, and then tell you about a project we're doing in Prospera this winter, January, February, called Vitalia. We're building the city of life. So my own background, who am I, Sebastian Brunemeier? I look myself in the mirror every day and ask this question. But for the purposes here, I'm a biomedical scientist by training. I've been in the longevity space over 10 years, did research at the lab bench at a bunch of different academic institutions. I helped launch what is today the largest aging-focused venture fund in the world, Apollo Health Ventures, $200 million under management. I co-founded several biotech companies that altogether are worth a little over $500 million today. And now I help run Healthspan Capital, which is the most active investor in the longevity space, as well as ImmuneAGE Bio, rejuvenating the immune system. Here's some other organizations I work with, and if you want to join the longevity space but you don't know where to begin, go to the Longevity Biotech Fellowship, longbio.com, and you can join. Healthspan Capital, we're the most active investor in the longevity and regenerative medicine space. Here are some of the beautiful faces of my team. They've worked at a bunch of big pharmas and prominent academic institutions. Here are some of our portfolio companies. We've actually done 23 deals in the last 18 months. So check out the website if you want to invest in our fund. So I'll tell you about longevity as the next medical revolution. So we have an exponentially increasing number of companies referring to themselves as longevity companies. Here's a snapshot of some of them. This is by no means a complete list. You can go on longevityList.com, which is run by my partner at Healthspan, Nathan Chang, which keeps tabs on all the companies and all the money in the space. Here are a couple prominent examples recently. So Altos Labs was the largest seed financing in history, $3 billion out of the gate, with Jeff Bezos and Yuri Milner and Nobel laureate Shinya Yamanaka and others involved. Calico is another example. This is a company launched by the team at Google and Art Levinson, who is the legendary CEO of Genentech. So just between the two of them, over $6 billion have been invested, and then the smaller amounts by other companies. So here's my social proof slide, some of the smart cookies that are in the space. Call your attention to Peter Thiel and Balaji, who are well known to this community, as well as Vitalik Buterin, who organized Zuzalu, which was a sort of pop-up city in Montenegro earlier this year. Okay, so why is it so important to address global aging? Because we have this silver tsunami demographic aging crisis. It's baked into the cake. There's nothing we can do about it at this point. And so one way we might mitigate those effects is by slowing the pace of aging. So if you look at this map, in the year 2010, the countries in red are those where over 20% of the population is over age 65 or retirement age, just Western Europe and Japan. But if you fast forward to 2050, it's almost the whole developed world, and the Ponzi pyramid scheme nature of the government budgets is not equipped to deal with this situation. But the good news is that biological immortality is physically possible. We can actually reset the biological age of cells. You can take cells from a 100-year-old person, treat them with some genes in a petri dish, and it will reset the epigenetic age. And a Nobel Prize was awarded for that work some years ago. This comes out of the work of August Weismann, who defined the germplasm theory that shows that your reproductive cells, the sperm and egg cells, they're actually immortal. This is germline immortality. They're passed down generation to generation, all the way to the dawn of life on this planet. And here's another schematic of how that works. So here's actually an image of some of these immortal germ cells. And here is an embryonic stem cells. These are very useful in clinical applications, but they were actually banned to be used in many countries. So hopefully I've just teased you a bit with the premise that cellular immortality is possible. Humans are just agglomerations of cells, and therefore organismal immortality is physically possible. Progress is slow. We've known for decades that slowing aging is possible in animal models. We can get up to about 50% lifespan extension in mice. So why is this not front page news every day? Why isn't Big Pharma working on this? And it has to do with the stasis of the corporation state and the technological stagnation hypothesis. So this was kind of popularized by Founders Fund with their We Were Promised Flying Cars. We got 140 characters. There's a narrow cone of advancement in the field of bits, but not in the deep tech world of atoms, which includes biotech. And you should check out the Founders Fund manifesto on their website for more. This is also a really good interview on the podcast of my good friend Nicholas Anzinger with J. Storrs Hall, who wrote this book about technological stagnation. So definitely check that one out. And this is my favorite podcast, and I listen to many podcasts, so would recommend it. Terence Keeley is another cool thinker who you guys may know about. He's basically argued that government funding of science counterintuitively slows the pace of progress, because it basically takes all the smart people who would be working at a Bell Labs or an industry doing something applied and practical and sticks them in the ivory tower of academia where they just fight amongst each other for small amounts of money and forward their favorite dogma. So you can actually listen to this Terence Keeley podcast in the Bitcoin Standard for more. So institutional decay is happening. Mark Andreessen refers to this. And basically, people trust their institutions and governments less, which is actually to their credit because they're starting to understand history a little bit. But progress is slowed technologically. Travel speed is actually slightly in decline. The Henry Adams curve is the amount of energy that we consume as a society, and it's actually stagnant since the 1970s. A lot of things stopped progressing in the 1970s. And also, the cost of approval of new drugs has also risen dramatically, and it's taken a lot longer than it has in the past. A friend of mine is Jack Scannell, advisor to Healthspan. He coined the term E-rooms law, which is widely used in the pharmaceutical industry, referring to the inverse Moore's law. So Moore's law, every 18 months, semiconductor power doubles. Well, the inverse is happening in pharma R&D. And furthermore, the governments are funding decreasingly novel, decreasingly innovative ideas. And Big Pharma is burning their investors' capital, so their rate of return is less than their cost of capital. So that's why it makes sense for them to acquire startups. So Big Pharma, like many big sclerotic institutions, is asleep at the wheel, but even they know it. So Jürgen Drews, head of R&D at Roche, said that biotech is taking up what pharma is neglecting, attacking the root causes of disease. David Baltimore of Caltech said the same thing about the biotech revolution in the 90s. So there's a new paradigm, so there's hope, which is this field of geroscience. If you were to tell people in the early 20th century that soon nobody is going, or very few people will die from infectious bacterial diseases by taking a pill, nobody would have believed you. But I'm here to tell you the same thing is hopefully going to occur in the coming decades with longevity, where we will bring the diseases of aging under medical control and even achieve rejuvenation. A lot of this is thanks to progress in the field of molecular biology and biochemistry. We understand the fundamental biology of aging a little bit better. Here's some of the pathways that are involved. And we know there are, this is out of date, probably about 100 interventions, genetic and pharmacological, that increase mouse lifespan along with their quantum of extension. Here are some of my personal favorites. I'll talk a little bit about bone marrow transplant in a minute. But we can achieve about 30% up to 50% healthy lifespan extension, and we can combine these interventions for synergy in the lab. Here's an example. So these mice are actually the same age, but they have an accelerated aging disease of progeria, and the mouse that looks younger was treated with a rejuvenation drug, and the other mouse was not. And this has become routine to do in the lab over the last 2 decades. Another kind of cool experiment in this space is called heterochronic parabiosis. It's covered a lot in the news because it's kind of a vampire thing where you surgically link the circulatory systems of an old and a young mouse such that they share blood, and the old mouse gets younger and the young mouse gets older. It's quite amazing. And you don't have to, steal the blood of your younger relatives or whatever, although I do have a connection if you're willing to pay. What we can actually do is identify the molecules that are circulating and then neutralize them or augment their levels. Another cool approach is rapamycin. So this is a pharmaceutical drug that's FDA approved, widely used over the counter to slow aging and for various diseases. One that I'm particularly keen on is bone marrow rejuvenation. So if you transplant young bone marrow into an old mouse, they live up to about 30% longer, and they're younger in every way that you look. It enhances cognitive function, physical function, etc. And so one of the things that I'm now doing at ImmuneAGE Bio is finding molecules that rejuvenate the immune system at the level of the bone marrow, which is the source of your immune system. So they all come from this one stem cell type called hematopoietic stem cells and give rise to all of the different immune cell types. And so if we rejuvenate those at the apex, we can rejuvenate the entire immune system, reducing the incidence of cancer, infectious disease, and many other diseases. And long story short, what we do is we can mobilize your hematopoietic stem cells into your bloodstream with a simple injection. This is peripheral mobilization. It's done routinely all over the world for a long time in bone marrow transplant. We isolate the HSCs, expand them by 1,000-fold with our method, rejuvenate them with cocktails of molecules outside of the body, and then bank them for later when you need them and reinfuse them acutely. So, for example, if anybody gets cancer and you're going to be prescribed chemo or radiation, that actually damages your immune system. And so if we had set aside some of these HSCs, we can actually reinfuse them post-chemo and radiation to restore the function of your immune system. Here's some of the team I have around the table. Lucky to have these colleagues, and some are quite prominent. One of them is the former CEO of Novartis. He's on our advisory board and an investor in the company. So get in touch if you're curious to learn more. Okay, so now I'll pivot to medical freedom, why it is so important to fight for. So you guys don't need to be convinced. Governments are becoming more authoritarian, and you can vote or you can exit. And so I think exit makes a lot of sense. You'll know about the millionaire migration. People of means who can get away do, and they're going to certain places. These places tend to have good weather, low taxes, and various opportunities, but we're kind of diluting our efforts by spreading ourselves so thinly across the world. So we should really focus on a small number of places and then try to gain political influence or at least protection from the local state in a limited number of places. My good friend Nicholas Anzinger put together this landscape. There's actually a new version of it available, but if you go on his website, Infinita VC, he might invest in your project and certainly bring you into the community. So there's a strong correlation between personal freedom and economic freedom. Probably don't need to convince you of that. So how do we do DeSci? How do we do this differently in free cities? DeSci, you basically fund science via the blockchain, whether it's biotech companies or radical academics. And so DeSci, one definition, is to new paradigm to discover, disseminate, fund, and execute scientific research without relying on governments, big corporations, or centralized organizations. So you can check out the Ethereum website for more. This is the DeSci landscape. There are many organizations joining all the time. We really only started this movement maybe 2-3 years ago, and it's grown massively. The layers of DeSci, so we actually take the intellectual property rights, put them on chain so that they can be liquidly traded, and then we fund them through these sort of venture funds that are on the blockchain. And then we have cloud labs that actually execute the research. One example is VitaDAO, which I advise, supported by Balaji, Vitalik, and others to finance longevity research. And you can get involved even if you're not a scientist. But we've created a bunch more BioDAOs through this organization called Molecule, PsyDAO for psychedelics research, ValleyDAO for synthetic biology, AthenaDAO for women's health, HairDAO for hair loss, and CryoDAO for cryopreservation of organs. So DeSci brings the computer revolution to the world of atoms, just like the printing press did to the Catholic Church, for example. So the disintermediation of science can overcome the government-backed monopolies that is holding back progress. And you can't really put the cat back in the bag. The idea has spread. It's an idea whose time has come. So to conclude, we would like to build these free cities with a focus on longevity. One example of doing this recently was Zuzalu in Montenegro. This was a really interesting experiment organized by Vitalik and VitaDAO. It was focused on longevity and crypto and so forth. And we're going to be doing something similar in Prospera this winter. So what features would we like to see in a longevity-free city? You guys will know about most of these. I won't dwell on them, but we would really like to encourage people who are interested in regenerative medicine and new forms of medicine to come live here and work here. So come to our LongBio and DeSci conference in November in Prospera. We're also with a gentleman called Greg Nakagawa building a certificatory non-punitive regulator within Prospera that basically ensures that all of the patients are happy and everybody knows the prices, but we will not tell anybody that they cannot use a certain therapy, which is the case today with FDA or EMA. And so round 1 was Zuzalu, round 2 is Vitalia in Prospera. So if you'd like to attend, you actually have to apply because we have very limited space, but you can find out more with that link. So we're building a regenerative medicine hub in Prospera. There's no one hub, so there are these clinics doing stem cell therapy all over the world, but what if we had like a Silicon Valley for the network effects in one place? And so you guys know where Prospera is in Roatan. Here's a mock-up of the design. They're doing gene therapy there already, and there's a cell therapy clinic too. Here's a little bit of what it looks like. The master plan is very exciting. There's a clinic there called the GARM Clinic, already doing regenerative medicine since 2013. It's run by Glenn Terry, who's a excellent orthopedic surgeon, and he was actually the head of the Olympic Medical Committee as well. And so part of this regulatory strategy is to make it really easy, the best place in the world to do advanced therapy clinical development. Also, join our political religious movement, a longevity cult called Vitalism, which is run by my friends Adam Gries and Nathan Chang, who actually want to concentrate our forces in the United States for those who are unable to leave the United States. They like Rhode Island, but also other hubs around the world. And the basic idea is that, governments are spending so much money on waste. What if we could encourage the governments and the private communities to actually spend more resources on longevity and prioritizing health? And so they want to do it in Rhode Island for various reasons. Also, I want to give a shout out to Uruguay. So I'm working with some people in contact with the Uruguay government. Uruguay is very friendly to us. Peter Thiel was just down there meeting with the president, Tim Draper, the VC as well. And so I think as far as Latin America goes, this is a very fertile ground. It's also food, water, and energy self-sufficient. So there you have it, the Switzerland of Latin America. Also, to conclude, if you want to know more about what we're doing, you can listen to this podcast interview where I talked to Nicholas Anzinger about what we're doing in Prospera and throughout Latin America. So the bad news is legacy countries are getting worse. It's not going to get better as the financial and demographic situation gets worse, but the world is a big place, so you can vote with your feet. And we can basically show by example what is possible. It's kind of like, I can't think of something that's more American, not that I'm particularly an American patriot, than creating a new system that works better and then exporting it to the rest of the world. That's what the United States colonists basically did. So with that, thank you everybody for listening, and feel free to get in touch on LinkedIn, and I wish you all a long and happy life.